I'm John from Great Lakes Country, and today we're making the most amazing barbecue duck à l'orange. Duck à l'orange is one of those classic French dishes that kind of fell out of popularity over the last few decades. It really peaked, at least in America, in the 1960s and 70s, thanks in big part to Julia Child bringing a lot of attention to French cooking in the US. Duck à l'orange was almost the epitome of fancy dinner food. And in fact, when I was a kid in the 80s, if we wanted to reference or poke fun at or otherwise talk about what the fancy rich people must be eating all the time, we would pretty much always use duck à l'orange as our example in the teasing. Nevertheless, I figured it was a classic for a reason, and I'd never actually tried it before. So I decided to make it and try it out, and it was actually pretty delicious. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a very special smoked version of this duck à l'orange, where we cook the whole thing on my Oklahoma Joe Bronco drum smoker. It's not actually that complicated a recipe or difficult a cook. There's just a couple things we're going to keep in mind as far as technique, and all the ingredients, well, they come together rather simply. So let's get right into it and make this beautiful, amazing barbecue duck à l'orange. Here we've got one very nice looking whole duck. But before we can really do much in getting this duck ready, we need to do a little bit of prep work first. Because this recipe calls for a whole bunch of oranges, and we need the juice from a bunch of them, we need the zest from a couple of them, but we're also going to be using the peels from the oranges that we have juiced to stuff into that duck. So before I really mess up my cutting board with the raw poultry or any of that stuff, we're going to get some of these oranges juiced. And for that, I will just use my little handheld juice-o-matic thing here. And I'm gonna need like 2 cups of the orange juice for this recipe. So that's probably gonna end up being about 6 of these oranges. And yeah, you could use just store-bought orange juice, but it's not gonna be as good. Plus you don't get all of those peels that you're gonna need to stuff inside of the bird. And if you're going all out and making this duck à l'orange dish, why not just do it the right way and buy a bag of oranges? All right, exactly 6 oranges to make 2 cups of our orange juice. And while I'm at it, I'll get a lemon sliced up because we're also gonna be stuffing a little bit of lemon into that bird. And it's completely optional, but you know, I think a little bit of some onion inside of there can only help. Some people stuff the duck cavity with carrots and other root vegetables. I'm not gonna do all that, but I happen to have this onion on hand, and I think it's gonna be perfectly nice in there. And we've also got some nice fresh rosemary that'll be going in there as well. But for now, let me clean this board up so we can get that duck back in here. All right, let's get this duck ready. The first thing we have to do is get in there and pull out any of the organs or the neck bone or any of that stuff that might come with it. Save this stuff for stock or do whatever you want with it. Make sure to get all in there because pretty much all of the organs tend to come inside of these things. I've already patted the outside pretty dry, but I want to do my best to dry some of the cavity as well, because trying to roast or smoke a sopping wet bird is never the way to go. Next, we need to do just a little bit of trimming. First, you know, unlike chicken wings, we don't really want this entire duck wing on here. We pretty much want to cut it right at what I guess I'll call the elbow, which is just about right here. Just find that joint, give it a little pop. It'll slice right off. Again, put this in your stock pot. It's perfectly good. We just don't need it for our smoked duck today. Next, we've got a lot of this excess skin around where the neck was, and we just don't need all of that. In fact, we don't really need most of it, so I'll trim a good amount of that off. I'm just gonna leave a little bit left over to kind of flap it closed when we're ready. As for the back side where the tail is, well, we can clean a little bit of that up as well. I don't mind leaving some of this in here because it's just gonna end up being good crispy skin, but the breast meat stops about right here. So all this isn't exactly needed, but when I tie up these legs, that all might help it stay pretty closed. So I'll just go ahead and I guess keep all of that right there, including this tail, which doesn't really serve any purpose other than that. Now we have to season this as well as stuff some things inside of that cavity, but I do want to get some seasoning inside of there first. Just as best I can, get a little kosher salt in there. I don't have to go crazy, just sprinkle some in there the best I can. And then we're gonna start putting in some of those juiced orange peels, as well as some of that onion, a couple of lemon slices, nice rosemary stuffed in there as well. Really just gonna put about as much stuff in there as we can fit. It's just gonna be flavor. It's just gonna help keep everything moist and juicy. And I'll see if I can get anything in the neck side while I'm at it. It's not quite as much room. That looks pretty good to me. So now let's get these little legs tied up. Keeping these tied nice and close to the body is gonna keep them from getting a little too brown. It's also gonna allow us to kind of cinch this whole cavity opening closed. Then we can tuck that piece of tail and that flappy skin just right under there. Now I'll get to seasoning the outside with some more of that kosher salt. We're gonna go on pretty generously. Make sure to get under the little wing pieces. This is gonna, of course, season and flavor our duck, but it's also gonna help dry that skin out so we can hopefully get some very good crispy skin, which is the ultimate objective with a duck à l'orange like this, or really any roast duck recipe. All right, I've got my seasoned and stuffed duck on a wire rack here, and I'm gonna stick this whole thing in the fridge for just a little while. Probably an hour, maybe as much as 2 hours. Just give all that salt a little bit of time to start working on that skin, drying it out, drawing out some moisture, and of course, flavoring it. And while we're waiting for that, let's get our orange sauce / glaze put together. It's relatively simple, but this is really a key component of the duck à l'orange recipe. So into a saucepan, we're gonna start with our 2 cups of that freshly squeezed OJ, 1 cup of chicken stock, or duck stock if you have it, 2/3 of a cup of white sugar. We need a 1/2 cup of this orange flavored liqueur called Grand Marnier, or a different brand of orange liqueur would work as well, but this is kind of the classic one to use. This stuff is great, by the way, not just for cooking duck. It's very tasty. And we need a pinch of some kosher salt. Let's call that a 1/4 teaspoon. And then we need the zest from 2 of those oranges. So using my little microplane grater here, I'll just get to zesting. And in it goes. It's called duck à l'orange for a reason, and that's because it's awfully orange forward if you couldn't tell by now. Anyway, we'll give all that a little bit of a preliminary stir. We're gonna get it over some heat and just bring it up to a very low simmer. We wanna get all that sugar dissolved, but we also wanna start reducing everything. And we're gonna end up letting this reduce by like half because we need it to get a lot thicker, a little more like a glaze. Now, some recipes call for doing a cornstarch and water slurry to thicken it up, and that's certainly an option. And I always could do that if it's just not reducing fast enough to my liking. But we've got a little time to kill, so I might as well just get it cooking off a little bit on pretty low heat, and we'll check back in on this sauce in a little while. And today we're cooking this duck à l'orange on the old Oklahoma Joe Bronco drum smoker. So we've got some good lump hardwood charcoal in the old charcoal basket here. I'll add me a couple of my little bird's nest fire starters, maybe a couple little chunks of some hardwood. This right here is apple wood from a tree that came down not 40 yards from here. Anyway, that'll just give us a little extra smoky flavor on our duck. Get them fire starters lit up. And we'll just let the smoker start doing its thing. Get my chimney vent open all the way, get my air intake vent open all the way. And to start, I'll just open up the whole lid, get some more airflow, make sure that charcoal gets nice and going. Anyway, we'll let this thing come up to temperature while we finish getting the duck ready. Okay, duck's coming out of the fridge. I can see that my salt is largely absorbed in. So there's just two more things we have to do before we can start cooking this bad boy. First, we need to cut a bunch of shallow slits all across these breasts because there's a layer of fat under this skin that's, well, actually probably a little bit too much fat. So by putting a bunch of very shallow slits all across both breasts, we can help that fat render out as it's cooking, which will both reduce the fat and make everything a little more delicious and golden brown and crisp up that skin. All things that we are looking for. So we don't want to slice all the way through into the meat, just some nice shallow slices through that skin and fat layer. And lastly, remember those oranges that we used to shave the zest off of it for the sauce? Well, we're going to take one of those and rub it all over the top of our bird. Just a little more flavor, a little more tenderization. We don't have to go crazy. I'm not going to bother flipping it over and getting the underside. Just a light little coating all over. Now Donald here is ready for the smoker, so let's move back outside. Now, ordinarily when cooking a duck like this, we're roasting it in an oven, which means heat is coming from the top. And what we would normally do is start off with the temperature quite a bit higher at like 450 degrees and then lower it down to like 325, 350. But because on a smoker like this, all of the heat is coming from underneath, I'm actually going to start this bird face down with that higher temperature. I've got this smoker heated up to 450 degrees, which is really more of a grilling temperature than a smoking temperature. But that's what we need to really start rendering some of that fat on the breasts and contribute to what will end up being some beautifully golden brown, crispy breast meat skin. So we're gonna let this cook away for 30 minutes at that 450 degrees, and then we're gonna come back, flip it over, bring the temperature down, and then we'll smoke it the rest of the way at that lower temperature. Too bad the recipe's not called turkey à l'orange, or for that matter, deer à l'orange. They must know that duck is on the menu today. Okay, half an hour is up, so it's time to flip this bird over. And I'd say that's looking just beautiful so far. And at this point, I'll also insert my little wireless probe thermometer here so I can keep an eye on the temperature during the rest of this cook. Just make sure to get it good and deep in one of them breasts. Then the lid goes down, and I've got the vent of the chimney and the air intake here adjusted so I can bring the temperature down to about that 325 to 350 I'm looking for. And that's where it's gonna stay for the remainder of this cook. Now we're gonna let this go for, I don't know, about another 30, 45 minutes. And then we're gonna come back and start basting it with that sauce about every 15 minutes until we're done. And I've had this orange sauce simmering on very low for about the last hour. It's reduced by, I'd say, about a half, definitely thickened up. It hasn't turned into a complete thickened, sticky glaze, but it's still liquidy enough that I can easily brush it on that bird a bunch of times, at which time it will cook on there and become beautifully sticky and amazing. But there is just one more thing to add, and that's a few cubes of some cold butter. Here I've got about, I don't know, 2.5 tablespoons, and we're just gonna stir that in. It's just gonna make the sauce a little more rich, give it a beautiful sheen to it. Now that sauce is done, so I'll just set it aside until I need it in just a little bit. All right, we've been smoking away for about 40, 45 more minutes. Our internal temperature is right at about 145. So I'm going to start basting with this beautiful orange sauce. And I'm going to continue doing this about every 15 minutes until our bird is done. And that's when it reaches 165 degrees in the breast. And I know that in a lot of preparations, you don't cook duck breast meat to that temperature. Normally, people might go medium or even medium rare because you can do that with duck. But for this roasted or rather smoked duck à l'orange, we're going to be taking it up to that 165 degrees. Don't worry, it's going to be amazing. It's not going to be dry. It's not going to be flavorless. It's going to be outstanding. Anyway, that's looking good, so lid closed for about another 15. All right, we've reached an internal temperature of about 100 and I'll say 62 degrees. So we're ready to pull this duck off. This duck is looking absolutely beautiful. It's smelling amazing. So now it's time to pull it off and let it rest for a few minutes. So I've just got it sitting here on another wire rack, and we're just gonna loosely tent it in foil for, I don't know, about 10, 15 minutes. Then finally, we're gonna be ready to slice in, see how we did. And there we are, after what ended up being a actually pretty easy and straightforward cook. The most beautiful barbecue duck à l'orange, well, definitely that I've ever seen. Was it kind of silly to serve it on this bed of orange slices and parsley? Yeah, kinda. But back in the day when this dish was at its most popular, people were really into their serving plate garnishes. And you know, I gotta say, it does look awfully pretty. And of course, we got our extra orange sauce, should we want to do any dipping or drizzling. And knowing me, I'm pretty sure I am gonna want to. So now, even though it's pretty much gonna destroy this beautiful presentation, I think it's time to cut on in and slice up some of this duck. First thing I'll do is take off the thighs. That is just about as straightforward as you'd imagine. Find that little joint and it should pop off relatively easy. Look at that. Man, the smell coming out of this, rosemary in there. And we'll do the other one. Now let's see about these beautiful duck breasts. I'm certainly no expert at carving poultry, but I am really trying to do my best. Surgically remove these breasts off the rest of the bird without butchering or wasting any meat. I think that looks pretty good to me. Let's see if I can do the other side just as well. I think so. And I'll pick at the rest of this bird a little later, but for now, I really want to slice into one of those breasts. Well, who says we can't still have a little bit of garnish? And I would be remiss if I didn't drizzle just a little bit more of this sauce over top of these breasts. Now that right there is a dinner fit for a, well, I don't know about a king, but how about a very lucky person from the 1960s? Or right now. Time to dig in. All right, let's do this. And it's so tender and juicy. Look at that skin, the golden brown. You know, as part of the process of making these videos, sometimes your food's sitting around a little longer than you'd like it to while you're setting things up and taking thumbnail pictures and all that. So this skin hasn't stayed as beautifully crispy as it was when I first finished cooking it, but straight out of the heat, it was definitely beautifully crispy, just like I wanted it. That being said, the taste, the flavor, it's so on point. And that orange sauce just warms my heart. It is so tasty. I'm gonna have a little more. There is nothing dry or bland about that duck breast meat. A lot of people say they don't like duck because it's way too fatty and greasy, and it definitely can be. But that's why you really gotta do that step where you score the skin and the fat layer on those breasts, so a lot of that fat can render out. If you do that step, it's not gonna be overly fatty or greasy. It's gonna be just right. Anyway, I'm extremely pleased with how this barbecue duck à l'orange came out. Of course, it would have been great in an oven, but what's wrong with adding a little bit of smoky barbecue flavor to it? So there you have it. What's not to like? Well, I guess unless you don't much care for duck. But you know what? This dish would work pretty well with a whole chicken as well. It's not as fatty as duck, so maybe you don't have to do that step where you score those lines into the breasts before cooking. But whatever you do, whatever you put it on, try that orange sauce. Put it on any kind of poultry or pork or probably anything, and it is so tasty. I'm quite certain that I like that orange sauce more than I like the duck itself. Anyway, if you want to see the full written out recipe for the exact duck l'orange recipe that I made here today, whether or not you want to cook it in an oven or a smoker, I will put a link to it in the video description below. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future cooking and barbecue videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.